Good evening. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting of the Lynbrook Board of Education for December 7th, 2022. If we could all please rise. Mr. Pileski will lead us in the pledge. Terry, all are present except for Mrs. Danino. If no one has any comments or changes, may I have a motion to accept the minutes of the November 9th, 2022 meeting? Mr. Pileski, second. Mr. Lunar, all in favor? No, I need a second on that first. I apologize. Mrs. Marcus, second. Ms. Murray, all in favor. Mr. Kunz, Art Gallery.
Good evening. The Burns-Seidemann Gallery is proud to present the Winter Gala Festival of the Arts show highlighting select work from Mrs. Ehrlich, Mr. Kunz, Mr. Lantini, Mr. Senna, and Mrs. Turner's art classes. The artwork on display was created by students in grades 9 through 12 and features work from our introductory level courses such as studio art and digital design all the way up to the AP drawing classes. In this show, we see several different mediums including marker, graphite, acrylic paint, and digital prints. The subject matter of the pieces on display varies and include digital vector self-portraiture, still lives of vintage toys and fruit, pattern designs created in colored pencil, and much more. While creating the work on display, the students learned a multitude of artistic techniques as well as the importance of creativity, observation, self-expression, and experimentation in the art-making process. Please take a moment to enjoy the wonderful talents of the Lynbrook High School art students in the Winter Gala Festival of the Arts show. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kunz. We're going to go out of order this evening. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Burek to discuss the Project Liftoff finalists.
I can dance.
What are we going to sing? Is it Rocket Man?
Ground control to Major Tom.
You keep going. Keep going. That's the best part of the whole night right there.
Only until March, folks. In March it'll be over. All right. Last month I announced our semifinalists and the fact that we held a symposium. And the students were given certificates, and we were very proud of the amazing work that they had done with the research on their designing their microgravity experiments. This evening, we have asked the three finalist groups to come tonight so that we can all, as a community, support them, because it is amazing the amount of work that they put in such a short period of time. So I think it's worth that all of us support that these budding scientists, and I hope that they continue to pursue science in some way, shape, or form. The first group is from a 6th grade Mrs. Reel's class at North Middle School, and I'll just share with you, I was recently in the classroom doing an observation, and the students in this class, this particular group, were in this class. How articulate. I know now why they made it to this level. They were so articulate, and how they described the scientific terms and how they conducted themselves in a lab, that I was so proud that there's such a bright future for our science research program if our students on the 6th grade level are behaving and speaking like this, that there's great promise for the future. So the first group that I would like to recognize is the group of Anderson Bell, Liam Proper, Owen Rudolph, and Antonio Zolo for their proposal that was the effect of microgravity on the oxidization of iron. Can you come up? Who do we have here? I'm going to call them all and then I'll, yeah, then I'll get you. Okay, the next group, and unfortunately, two of the group members cannot be here, but we have Bailey Georgoulis, did I say that right? Okay. Delia Kirkpatrick and Annabelle Murray for their proposal entitled Hodgkin Lymphoma Cells in Microgravity. So. And they're actually in Mr. Mackerline's, also a middle school class. Bailey, okay. Go stand over there. You want to take a shirt? There you go. There you go. I know, he's a very proud dad this evening because our last group, the proposal is entitled, How Does Microgravity and Space Conditions Affect the Growth of the Wine-Cap Mushroom? And I'm not going to say the scientific name, so I'll leave that up to you. And we have two members in this group, and they are from Mr. Volkovsky's, and he's here to support his students, Mr. Jack Murray and Aiden Michaels. Come on up. So one of these three groups will have a winning experiment that will actually fly up on SpaceX the experiment will be conducted on the International Space Station. We were hoping we would have that winner by the December board meeting, but the announcement is probably not going to be until December 15th, so I will announce it at the January board meeting, but work continues. So the science part of that, I'll wait for my report to do the other half, so you can go. You can go. Go ahead.
Before we move on to trustees' reports, we will take a quick break to allow those students to scatter out. I'm sure they have work to do to get home with, so congratulations again. Just looks so wrong with Mr. Sorosi back there, the only one without a beard. Just doesn't look right. Get next to him. There you go. There you go. No, you just got there, Lisa. I don't think we even have a quorum to continue. All right, moving on to report from trustees. If you could begin with a Facilities Committee report, please. Mr. Murray.
The Facilities Committee met on November 8th, and the initial purpose was to look at the wide variety of capital project improvements that we were looking to put into the 23-24 budget. Mr. Seda, our facilities director, along with Dr. Lynch, worked with us, and the principals and department heads had made recommendations. The committee started to evaluate those recommendations. We actually met on November 22nd to do a walkthrough for each of those major projects around the district. I think we visited 3 or 4 of the schools. And we will continue to work as a committee and then bring to the full board our recommendations. And we'll be prioritizing those projects that deal with student health and safety or the student learning experience as we prioritize those issues, because we can't do everything.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Do you have anything regarding the Policy Committee?
Yes, I do. The Policy Committee also met on November 28th, and we went through a number of policies to review. Some of those will be ready for a first reading soon, but we discussed the public sales on school property, which has a lot of things in it, but the piece that we were specifically looking at was allowing games of chance to take place on school property. So we we'll be recommending some language that will allow some of those raffles and games of chance as long as they meet the state gaming and Town of Hempstead gaming laws. We also just had to update some language around relations with booster organizations that really also went with that whole concept of raffles. We made some updates to our harassment and bullying policy that have to deal with cyberbullying and bullying and harassment that take place off school grounds, and allowing the school to deal with those issues. We clarified the procedures if a board member were to resign midterm, and put some timelines on that. We had to also update our homebound instruction policy to align with new state regulations around the amount of time students are entitled to that homebound instruction if they're suspended or ill at home for a long-term illness. And then we had to address our student code of conduct to also account for the behaviors that sometimes take place in the cyber world or off campus that are still create a major distraction or unsafe situation in the school building.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mrs. Argona, PTA Liaison Report.
Yes, so PTA Council would like to thank everybody who attended the Joint Council presentation. It was a great success. Also, there is a concert clothing drive still going on. They've received a lot of donations, but they're still continuing the collection. So there will be a donation box at the Friends of Music table at each concert. Also, if any child is still in need of concert clothing, please reach out to your building PTA president, and they'll do their best to help. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Argona. Mrs. Marcus, DEI Committee.
The DEI District Council was scheduled to meet yesterday and used the time to discuss the recent cowardly acts of hate at Lynbrook High School and South Middle School. It was agreed that although the incidents were addressed, more must be done to tackle the underlying issues. Lynbrook Public Schools remain committed to supporting all students and staff and keeping them safe. Hate symbols and speech are not tolerated, and acts of anti-Semitism and racism have no place in our schools or community. Our students must be encouraged to stand up for what is right, and it is our responsibility to educate them on how to do so in a respectful and productive manner. Exposure to other cultures and practices will continue to foster understanding and inclusion. It was also suggested that expanding the opportunities for high school students to share their experiences with elementary students may be beneficial. The DEI committee would also like to thank Rabbi Ross of Temple Amachad for sharing his time and expertise and suggesting the possibility of starting a community interfaith advisory council.
Thank you, Mrs. Marcus. You know, as you read that committee report, I'd like to bring up a conversation with the board about the manner in which we communicate with the community when these acts take place. To me, I think it's counterproductive when a symbol of hate shows up on our property and then we go out there telling the community about it and the media picks up about it. All we're doing is amplifying the voice of someone who's either a racist or not very bright, maybe doesn't even understand what they're doing. I think we could do a good job internally, as we have been doing, addressing the issues and making sure everyone understands the importance of empathy and understanding different people and different needs and so forth. But I don't necessarily think it's in the best interest of us or our students every time something happens, because I think it'll promote copycats. We don't really can identify who it is. I think we should still investigate it. I think we should still look to identify the person who's doing it. If we do identify that person, I think we should definitely have law enforcement take it prosecution and handle it that way. If it's one of our students, in addition to whatever law enforcement should do, we should spend time educating them and making sure they understand the gravity of what they're doing, because we don't really know the extent of why that person's doing it. It wouldn't surprise me if it's someone who just wants to see the reaction and doesn't really fully understand the meaning behind those type of words. But I'd like to open up to the board and have your thoughts on that.
I don't disagree with you that we might not need to notify the whole community every time something happens, because it might make people, copycat somebody else, or, maybe they're just looking for attention, now they're getting attention. But I do think, I mean, you had made a comment that we're doing a good job internally handling it, and I think that we've agreed, especially like during the DEI council meeting, that we could always be doing a better job. And that is the, you know, the point, that we're going to try to implement things that would make everybody feel more inclusive. And that's the, you know, the whole point of, you know, people, students and staff should feel comfortable in the school buildings and on the school property. And we're going to continue to look at ways that that can be improved, because there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Ms. Marcus, I think the responses that have gone out have been reactions to situations, and I think our obligation as a school system is to actually put things in place that prevent them from happening in the first place, to make sure that our curriculum and our classroom creates that sense of belonging and identity in students, that they don't feel the need to express those types of feelings, and they know how wrong and hurtful and harmful they are in a preventative manner rather than a reactionary manner. So I would agree with that. I'm glad the DI committee is doing that kind of work, and I would agree with Mr. Belmont that to call to attention every time something negative happens in a school is counterproductive, because it takes away from all of the great things that happen, and we don't announce all the great things that happen in our school. And it would give the appearance of things are more negative than they actually are by only sharing out those kinds of situations and not sharing out all of the amazing things that are going on every single day.
So I don't disagree that, you know, there's a lot that can be done better. And the DEI committee is doing great work to try to prevent people from, you know, acting in the way that these two individuals who have, you know, scrawled stuff on a tree or in a bathroom have acted. But I am torn on the reporting element of it, because while I don't think we need to send letters home every single time every single thing happens in the school, I think not calling out acts of racism can be viewed by the perpetrator as condoning those acts. So, you know, a lot of people have posited the person who scrawled what they scrawled on the bathroom wall, and it was a swastika, was probably just a kid screwing around. Possibly, but we don't know that. And if the person who scrawled that swastika was actually an anti-Semite, by not calling them out and not telling the whole community this happened and we condemn it, implicitly we're condoning it. So I think it's a matter of striking a balance between sending out letters every single day when every single kid utters something inappropriate, and basically saying we're not going to send anything home. We have to strike that balance. But I don't think we should just ignore when these types of incidents happen. A swastika on a bathroom stall, or the N-word, or equally offensive language to other ethnic, religious minorities is powerful, and we need to, as a district, call it out.
Now, I mean, I agree with you to the extent that it's not that it would be sweeping it under the rug. It's just that it would be dealing with it internally at the building level, at the classroom level, wherever, you know, the district, you know, feels that it's necessary. But, you know, I do understand what you're saying, and I think striking the balance, you know, is the right answer.
Right, but I'd also like to say, though, we keep referring to the phrase calling it out. I think it is called out when we address it with a school-wide assembly, when teachers handle it in their own classroom and deal with the underlying issue of why this stuff is terrible and can't happen. Sending a letter home to parents, you know, we want to keep parents informed as best we can, but that doesn't necessarily address the issue. We need to trust our professionals within the building that they're going to handle the situation right and educate these kids on why this is bad. That's got to be our number one focus. The notification aspect, you know, you made the comment that these two people did it. I mean, for all we know, it could have been the same person. It could have been the same person who did it, because the letter went home the first time, and he or she liked the attention he got from said letter, and then maybe decided he wanted to do it again, he or she. So who could tell? And the other problem is, what do we decide is worthy of a letter? You know, that's a little bit of an issue. Is it strictly a swastika and the N-word, or is it something, you know, else? You know, or there are many other things that might be worthy of a letter. I don't know how we handle, how we police 1,000 kids and inform the parents every single time something like this happens. It seems unreasonable. I think we have to really concern ourselves with educating these kids the right way, so that, you know, we mitigate it that way and kind of cut it out that way.
The only thing I'd add about the notification is, and you know, if one of the administrators could confirm this, I would hope or trust that a particular student who was in some way hurt, harmed, upset by one of those acts came to the counselors or administration for support, that family would absolutely get notification.
But Sean, that's the same way, right? If two kids had an issue in class, that would be done, right? Little Johnny says something to little Joey, and they go down and they always upset, and then our guidance and our social, they handle that and they address it, and the parents would be informed about it, but it's not, you know,
no, exactly.
My concern is giving the impression, as the first incident did, that, you know, whenever we discuss these topics of hate groups and where it may exist, and I addressed this a couple meetings ago, is there's a difference between having a one-off or a random act and giving the appearance of an organization or a community having systemic racism or hate. And that's my concern. And that's the problem with promoting it and having the news media that could care less about what's in our best interest, but coming down and giving the impression, oh, look what happened in Lynbrook. They didn't come down here because they cared about us. They didn't come down here because they wanted to do anything. They thought it was a great story. It was something inflammatory. So for me, I also don't believe that whoever did that didn't know it was wrong. It's one thing if we never had DEI issues, and I definitely agree, you can always do better. There's nothing we can't do better on. But they knew what they were doing was wrong. They may not have understood the severity of it, but we're constantly educating our kids in the right way to do things. So we don't have to have a major event every time something like that happens, because we're continuing to do it. We're trying to stay ahead of that. And when an event happens like that, if someone has an issue with it, let's like it was one-on-one, hopefully we have services to address this, but we don't have to give the impression and give the voice to the person doing it any greater than what their act deserves. So.
See, and I look at the other side of it, and I understand the point. We don't want copycats, and we don't want to encourage and give a kid. The worst thing you could do to a teenager is tell them not to do something, because they're going to look at it and want to do exactly that. So yes, we are giving a voice to somebody who wanted attention and got it. But I also think that by not calling it out each time and by kind of not really acknowledging it, we may be, and I don't want to say sweeping an issue under the rug, but we don't know how systemic the issues are in our district. And I'm not saying Lynbrook has an issue any worse than any other district. I think society has issues that they need to grapple with, because these issues are coming up more and more in every district in the country, whether it's anti-Semitism, homophobia, anti-minority feelings. These issues are out there, and I think by simply saying, oh, they exist and we'll deal with it on a school level, I'm not sure that's really calling it out. It's implying that this neighborhood does not have any issues at all, when no neighborhood has no issues at all on this front. I think we need to do more. I also think, okay, so the example of little Johnny and little Timmy have a fight and those kids are affected. If there is a swastika or the N-word on a bathroom stall, we don't know how many kids saw that day until it was erased and washed away. 200 kids see it. 2 of them may have gone home and told mom and dad, or come to the guidance counselor, and those kids will have a talk and we'll talk it through. But you don't know if another 180 kids did, or 198 kids in my example, saw it and didn't say anything to anybody, but they come home and they see that word normalized because there was no reaction to it. So again, I do understand that not every single incident at school requires a letter home, and not everything requires an assembly and a video. But we do need to strike the balance between simply dealing with it on an incident-by-incident basis and just talking to maybe 1 or 2 kids who may have been offended, and bringing the community into it, because it is an issue.
But when you say there's no reaction to it, the reaction is at the building level and how the building deals with it. It might not be communicated to the whole neighborhood, but there is a reaction to it. If it's found in the building level deals with it.
But doesn't that raise the question, so are we going to have an assembly in the high school every single time? If for 6 straight weeks we find a swastika or the N-word or something equally horrible, are we going to have an assembly every week? I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is.
I don't think that's the response. I think the response is, and off the top of my head, and I'm very comfortable with the amount of staff that we have in the building addressing it, if Mr. Sorosi simply said, if there was something upsetting that you saw in the bathroom, you need assistance, come down and do it. But whatever it handles, I'm comfortable in the way they've been handling it for 70 years, to do it internally, and the variety of options they have, other than going out to the community and letting them think and get the impression that something's systemic when it's not. There's a multitude of resources internally, and the assembly doesn't have to be in response to the act. They're doing assemblies all the time anyway. It comes up in classes. Social studies class talks about these type of issues. English class talks about these issues. So they're constant issues. They're constantly addressing the issue. I don't think we have to go every time there's an act to make it into some global issue. I think they're comfortable in the building figuring out ways to make sure they address the need and for the sensitivity of kids.
But, you keep on saying that it's systemic when people think it's systemic when it's not. I don't know if we know. I mean, I don't think that Lynbrook is any different than many other districts and other areas, in our area. But I would not make a statement that there is no systemic racism.
I would.
I don't know. I don't know that.
I do.
I mean.
I do. I don't think that racism is, or anti-Semitism or hate is systemic in Lynbrook, being I've been here for 57 years. It exists. It exists like it does in other places, but this has always been an extremely diverse community. And by definition of the word systemic, no, I don't think racism or hate is systemic.
Systemic and diverse are two different things.
Correct. And I think
you can have a diverse
and are not
community that has
systemic.
systemic racism in it. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive.
So
No, I said we're diverse, and I don't believe we have systemic, I won't even use racism. I don't think we have systemic hate, which encompasses all the different groups that would be the victims of any of those
I
groups.
don't know if we do or we don't. I'm just saying that I don't feel
Well, until we
comfortable
do, I would say we don't.
Well, guys, I also think there's a difference between systemic racism and systemic instances of hate. And that's kind of what we're looking to address right here. Solving the problem of racism is something that this school board probably not going to be able to do on our own, but cutting down instances of hate and hate speech and hate symbols is something that we can address to the best of our ability. But strictly on a numbers basis, the fact that we've had 2 incidents, and I've been here 3 years, and I haven't heard about this for a long time. I've never heard of this happening in the past. So it seems more like an outlier than a systemic issue when you're talking about people scribbling graffiti and hate graffiti on stalls and on trees. So I wouldn't necessarily classify it as systemic, but whether it is or it isn't, I still think you have to handle it the same way. Like Mr. Belmont said, you continually educate these kids about how it's wrong and hope that does what we can do. I think the issue is whether or not we notify the entire community. I don't have a single issue with how the district's handling the education of the kids. We just have to determine whether or not does this require a letter every time one of these incidents happen. That's, I think, the bigger issue. No one here is questioning whether or not it should be called out. And everyone knows it should be called out. But
it's just in what way?
But sending a letter home,
Right.
That's not necessarily calling it out. I mean, calling it out is, dealing with the kids and explaining to them why this is wrong. That to me, that's calling it out.
And I think the issue too with the letter is, like Pat said, in all these years, you haven't had so many instances of this, but we happen to have 2 in such a small amount of time. And my curiosity lies with the attention the first incident got with the news, the letter, did that lead to a copycat situation? And is that just gonna keep? And I don't think, sending a letter home is going to solve racism, unfortunately, and I think we do need to constantly educate our kids. But I don't think we need to send a letter for every incident, because I just think it gives a voice to the wrong people, and I don't think we should be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not advocating for a letter for every single incident, and I want to be clear on that. I'm not saying every time any incident happens at school, a rule of thumb is if the police have to be called, a letter may want to go home to the community. That may be a way that we demarcate. If there is an incident that requires us to actually call the police, that may be something we want to tell the community about. There were 2 incidents in a 1 or 2 week span, but these are not the only incidents we've ever had in recent years in this community. There have been incidents in the schools long before I was on the board where parents, I remember a year or 2 ago, there was a parent who came who was very upset about an incident that happened in school. So to say that there's never incidents and these 2 incidents just happened very close together, I'm not saying just Ms. Aragona. I didn't
mean there was never.
No,
I
I'm
just
saying.
meant two.
Right, this isn't in response to what Ms. Aragona just said. Just generally, I think we have had incidents over the years, and I just think that we need to figure out the best way to balance the policy of when do we alert the community and when do we deal with it internally. It is a slippery slope, so we need to it's a balancing act.
I have, do agree with you that there have been other times. It's not just these 2 times, but I think the question is, you're sending a letter home to notify the community for what purpose? To have discussions with their kids, or just so they know that it occurred? I mean, we could send letters home after we've had an assembly that discussed, inclusivity or, diversity, and explain to the parents, this is what the children were taught. We just wanted you to know in case you wanted to reinforce this at home, or in case your children brought up any questions.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a knee-jerk reaction to an incident, but we should, if we're trying to educate the students, we should be explaining to the community how we are educating them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm certainly not advocating for a letter home every single time something happens. I think what Ms. Marcus raised is a really good point. We have an assembly. We send a letter home. This assembly was given. Parents understand what happened, and they could supplement what we're doing, because it's a partnership between us and the parents. We are doing one function, and we have to recognize the parents support us just like we support them. But sending a letter home and saying there was an assembly, and here's what happened, we also include why there was an assembly, though, right? That's what we've done in the recent letters. I don't know that we need to send a letter every single time, but look, I have a high school student. I now get daily bulletin board announcements from the high school from Mr. Sorosi sends them around, and as a parent, I love it. I could say to my son, there were these 3 clubs. Did you go to any of them? Did this happen? It's just a matter of being more communicative. I don't think you can ever be too transparent. And I think this is just a matter of transparency. And I think we're in really crazy times. We have racism throughout the world. Anti-Semitism, which is what we've dealt with recently, is the fastest growing form of racism in the US and in New York, ahead of any other currently. I think it's an issue that's impacting communities locally, statewide, and nationally. And again, when these issues are this hot button and this serious, I don't think you can ever be too transparent. No one ever said, I heard too much from my school district. So again, it's a balancing act, and maybe we can all figure out the best way to balance it. But I think when the police have to be called, parents probably want to know why they were called. And that's how I view it.
I'm not gonna be. Anything else from any other trustees on things to report?
I just wanted to share my appreciation for and congratulations for the music department at West End. I was at their winter concert last evening. I think it was the first one of the winter season. They did a really fabulous job, and particularly I wanted to, I know you're not supposed to talk about individual teachers, but the work Mr. Malesio has done in his very short time after moving to West End, it was just really incredible to see the passion of the students in his orchestra, so I appreciated that. And then today I had the opportunity to participate as one of the adult volunteers for Challenge Day. The high school brought in an organization called Challenge Day, and it was a emotional roller coaster. We broke up into groups. They called them family groups. It was one adult with 4 to 5 students, and it was a place to share the highs and the lows of your life, and to get support from one another, and it was really a very powerful experience, and I was just very happy to be part of it. And even more so, I was so impressed at the empathy and compassion that these high schoolers were able to share with and for one another, including total strangers. You know, this school's not that big, but it's big enough that you don't necessarily know everybody. And just the culture of the building that it spoke to really impressed me. So I just wanted to appreciate the school for bringing that in.
I'm so happy that we are having Challenge Day again, because I went to it with one of my sons probably 10 years ago, and it still, resonates with me how the kids opened up and were just, it was an emotional, draining experience, but in a good way when you came out of it. And that, the school also, has support for students that, some emotions may have been, deep down inside, and all of a sudden, bubbled up to the surface that day. And, the guidance counselors and support staff were, always there, to help them.
I had the opportunity to attend the Waverly Park Veterans Day presentation that they do every year. For those who have not been, it's a really special, great event that they put on. I no longer have kids at Waverly Park, but I remember when I did, actually my grandfather, who was a veteran, used to go. It was his favorite day of the year. He would come and bring his Navy hat for the kids to see. They really do an amazing job. The kids sing songs, and the kids give out trinkets, but trinkets that the kids made, so they have meaning to them, to the veterans, and it's a great moving event, and it really, anyone who hasn't seen it, you should try to take an opportunity to get it there and see it.
I went to go see the high school musical, Anything Goes. The kids did an absolute amazing job. I am so impressed with their singing, their dancing, their acting, the music, the orchestra pit. They're amazing, and they did such a great job. My kids loved it, I loved it, and I'm blown away every time I go.
Seeing nothing else from the board, moving on, we have no old business this evening. Under new business, every year we invite members of the Joint Council of PTAs to meet with the board. The date for this year is January 25th, and we'll have an invitation forthcoming to that organization. Dr. Burek, Superintendent's report.
Okay, I'll spare you from the music again. The other piece of the Project Liftoff update I would like to share is, now that we've gone past the science research, the experiment part of the program, the other half of the competition is a mission patch art and design competition. So students in grades K through 12 are invited to design a mission patch to be sent to the International Space Station. Just in case you didn't know, mission patches have been part of the America's space program since the 1960s. We'll have two contests, one for students in grades K through 5 and one for students in grades 6 through 12. The art teachers in the district will review the rules outlined in a flyer, and then there will be a committee of faculty, staff, administrators, and community members will be voting on the winning design. So we tried to balance this, so we have a science part of the brain, and then we have the art part of the brain, and hopefully we'll have a lot of kids participate in this. More will be forthcoming on the art project in the spring, probably late spring, perhaps early summer. These patches will be launched to the International Space Station along with the winning science experiment designed by our students, and will return to Lynbrook with embossed certificates. So once again, very exciting project, and I hope all the kids who did not participate in the science research part of it will participate in the art patch design. And with that curriculum update, Dr. Balakas?
At Lynbrook High School, we're actually very excited to plan to introduce 4 new courses, namely the Introduction to Woodworking, Business Law, Drone Programming and Piloting, and AP Pre-Calculus. We're going to see these in the presentations at a later date, but the courses, the Introduction to Woodworking is being proposed as a second-year option in our technology sequence. This hands-on course would provide students with the skills to safely use a variety of hand tools and machine tools commonly used in woodworking. Business law is being proposed as an offering for upperclassmen, so sophomores through seniors, and the students can receive 3 college credits through SUNY Farmingdale. Various legal topics and issues would be discussed, and students would learn how to make ethical, legal-minded professional decisions. Drone programming and piloting would follow a curriculum that guides users through all aspects of responsible drone use, including safety, regulations, and real-world applications of drone technology. The course would be designed to guide students through all material related to the FAA Part 107 Remote Pilot Certification Standards, and any student who's at least 16 years of age may be eligible for their FAA certification exam. Last but certainly not least, our current pre-calculus honors course would be replaced with AP Pre-Calculus, a new course offered by the College Board. The curriculum for this course would be very similar actually to what we're already teaching in our pre-calculus honors course, and would prepare students for other college level math and science courses.
I'm just saying that's great. You know, the fact that we can continue to expand our offering for our students is great, especially going to bring back the woodworking. The drone technology is that industry is growing so fast, and I know so many of our kids have an interest in that, and that's great. And of course, with all the science and technology, that's been part of what we do and going forward. It's really nice to see that business law class being tucked in there. So let's encourage the humanities. Thank you, Mr. Legs.
No, you're welcome. Any other questions about that? If not, I'll continue with the report. All right, I'm going to continue moving on. The Assessment Weighting Grading Commission had its first meeting on November 22nd. There were 29 community members in attendance, representing students, parents, teachers, and administrators. After the initial introductions and a reading of the commission's charges from Dr. Burak, the group went to work. There were lively discussions regarding the goal and purpose of assessing students, particularly in the area of homework, and the difference between formative and summative assessments. These discussions will continue, and the large group will be split into 3 to discuss assessment, weighting, and grading practices within related disciplines. The 3 groups will be humanities, STEM, and other courses not ending in Regents exams, and the next meeting will be held on December 13th. Thank you.
And Dr. Lynch, Capital Projects.
The board will be awarding contracts tonight for 2 projects. The Waverly Park's tennis courts and handball courts and pickleball courts will be awarded tonight. And also the high school renovation of the library project will be awarded tonight. Keep your eyes out. We'll be hopefully getting the plans out of the state, and we should be able to be bidding the North Turf Field and the Marion Street Turf Field, and hopefully have that in place for this summer.
At this time, we'll move to public comment. If anyone would like to address the board, please come to the microphone, identify yourself, and indicate if you live in or out of district.
Hello. My name is Adriana Albritton, and I'm a resident. I just have a question. So tomorrow, the Department of Health is meeting to discuss mandates for the masks. And in January, they're discussing the mandates for the vaccine, for the COVID vaccine, for the students in order to attend school. Do we have an update on that, or?
No, I think, it's obviously that's a hot topic. There was 2 things that were being discussed recently by both the governor's office and picked up by the media. Was one, the idea of mandatory vaccination and what they were doing about masks. As far as anything I've heard from the people I speak to in Albany and anything that we hear locally, and if Dr. Burak wants to weigh in on what she's heard, that's fine. But I've heard that, one, they were strongly recommending the masks, but not to be mandated. And I haven't heard anything about the vaccinations being mandated, but the governor has said it's something she's considering. It was something that was discussed during the election of what she might be doing. And I'll also point out that my understanding of the numbers were that only 40% of eligible voters voted. So for every 10 people, 6 stood home during that election and didn't show up at the election booth. So it is something she's considering. Obviously, if it's mandated, we're in the same situation we've been in previously. We would discuss with our council what that means. But at this time, unless anybody else on the board has a different sense of it, this board is not inclined to impose on its own a mask mandate or a vaccination mandate.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, good evening. My name is Therese Gallagher. I'm a resident with kids in the school district. I'm here on behalf of Christine Stanton, who also has kids in the school district. She, I believe, sent an email to the board for the late bus committee, making a formal request. She wasn't able to be here, so she just wanted me to read it into the record for her. To Dr. Berman and members of the Board of Education. First, thank you for all you've done for the children of Lynbrook. Dr. Berman, your response to last year's bus concerns with late and missing drivers was outstanding, and as a result, those problems were resolved quickly. This is greatly appreciated by all Lynbrook families that have been affected by those challenges. Many families in our community have requested late buses for their children. This request has been dismissed due to the insurmountable cost. At a board meeting last year, the cost of providing late buses had been estimated to be $1 million. However, this projection was based upon providing transportation for every child in the school district to their home resident. I would like to form a committee, including parents, to investigate a more cost-effective options. These ideas include some ideas include having students safely transported to one central location within the district, like this high school or the kindergarten center. This would allow the driver to make only one stop in Lynbrook rather than multiple stops to homes and residences, saving both time and money. Of course, we do not know exactly how many students would be involved and if one bus would be sufficient. Currently, there are 2 high schools that share a bus, which is a great option to save on transportation costs. In addition, the possibility of piggybacking with a neighborhood district should be explored. This involves sharing the cost of transportation with a nearby community that already provides a late bus. I can appreciate the fact that I am no expert in district transportation, and that there may be more variables that I'm not aware of that would make this more challenging. My goal is simple: to provide all Lynbrook students safely to return to Lynbrook after attending extracurricular activities. There is no cost to the district to create a committee to further investigate this endeavor. Thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to your response. Christine Stanton.
Thank you. Seeing nothing else from the community, sadly, we have one sympathy resolution this evening. Whereas the members of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District have learned with sorrow of the passing of Roseanne Minikel, former employee of the Lynbrook School District, and whereas Roseanne Minikel served as an English teacher at Lynbrook High School for 30 years, from 1968 through 1998, and whereas the Board of Education is mindful of the contributions made to our district by Roseanne Minikel during her years of service to our community, be it resolved that the Board of Education records its sorrow, its sympathy, and the esteem in which she was held. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Ms. Minikel with the hope that they will find solace and comfort in the rich heritage of good works for which she is remembered and revered. I'd like to ask for consent agenda on resolutions 2212C1 through 2212C7, 2212N1 through 2212NC8, 2212G1 through 2212G22. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Murray, second. Mr. Pileski, all in favor? May I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mrs. Aragona, second. Mrs. Marcus, all in favor? Thank you. Our next meeting will be on January 11th. Everyone hopefully have a happy and healthy, enjoy the holiday season. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn to go into executive session to discuss a matter of personnel. Mr. Murray, second. Mr. Pileski, all in favor? Thank you. Everyone get home safe.